Yes, I can.
All right. If you can hear me, Mr. Effiong, I just needed your take on some of the developments that you're seeing across the country. As a legal practitioner, I'm sure every expertise has their perspective on this issue. Before we have the time to get into some of the nitty-gritty, as much as time will allow, your first impression on how government is managing this situation?
For me, I think it's quite embarrassing that over time we have seen school children being kidnapped without any form of reprieve from government. It appears that children who go to school to study have been left to their fate. Nigerian children are now in a state of complete helplessness. The school is supposed to be a sacred place. It's supposed to be a place for learning. It's supposed to be a sober environment. So to now have so-called bandits and terrorists invade schools on almost a weekly and a monthly basis, hundreds of school children have been kidnapped over the years, and yet the government seems completely lost on how to address this menace. It is embarrassing. It portrays the country as one that has lost control of its territorial sovereignty, and to even imagine that this is happening, this latest kidnap of about 287 school children is happening in Kaduna, the state that had the highest concentration of military formations and facilities in the country. That speaks to the institutional decay. That speaks to lack of leadership. That speaks to a government that doesn't care. And then to have the government come out to say, oh, we are not going to negotiate, we are not going to pay ransom. So what are you going to do? Are you going to leave the school children to be slaughtered? Are you going to leave them to remain at the mercy of their kidnappers? Because I tell you for free, many of these children, their parents don't have the means to pay the ransom. So whatever President Tinubu says, he remains the commander-in-chief, and he has a constitutional obligation to secure the release of those children. And that must be done immediately.
So let's talk about some legal issues here. It appears sometimes legislation is not really as, as potent as it should be. Not because there are no laws. Maybe you can walk us through some of the laws we can look at to ensure that, we make sure everyone can do their job. So for instance, one of the things people are having as a challenge is the fact that even when these bandits or terrorists or whatever name we want to call them are arrested, we don't see the process, the judicial process, maybe expedited as much as possible or come to a conclusion or a satisfactory conclusion. What can be done so that it serves as a deterrent to some of these people who have made an enterprise out of kidnapping and collecting ransom?
I'm not going to really blame the judiciary quite much for what seems like the lack of justice or the lack of accountability. Because you are not going to have conviction, you are not going to have trial, except these terrorists are arrested, investigated, arraigned in court, and diligently prosecuted. What we have seen, particularly under the last administration of President Buhari, which Tinubu seems to have continued in line with his promise to continue from where Buhari stopped, it appears that the whole thing has been politicized. There seems to be commercialization of the kidnap industry in our country. And it seems that some people in highly placed positions are profiting from what is going on. So if we are going to have trials, if we are going to have convictions, there has to be arrest, there has to be prosecution. But how many prosecutions have we seen? How many of the so-called bandits have we seen being prosecuted? Under the former governor of Kaduna State, because I have to also mention to you that kidnap is basically a state offense. Except they are charged for terrorism, under the law, kidnapping and murder are state offenses. And it is the state that is supposed to prosecute, not necessarily the federal government. But because this is done as a form of terrorism, the federal government under the Terrorism Prevention Act can actually prosecute them at the federal high court. But I was making the point that we had a former governor of Kaduna who came out on record to confess to having had to pay ransom or pay some people to stop kidnapping. Nobody has asked him where he found these people. Nobody had asked them how the money was paid. Now, currently, we see that this thing has persisted. It has persisted because there is now a strong perception that people are profiting, as I said, from this kidnapping that is going on. And this negates the obligation of our country to international covenants and treaties to which Nigeria is a signatory that requires that the third party, the Nigerian state, to protect children. It is also a violation of the Child Rights Act that was passed by the National Assembly. It is also a violation of the Constitution because these children have been denied the right, their lives are being threatened, their liberty has been denied, their movement has been denied, they have been denied parental care and love, they have been denied the right to education. These are rights that the government has a duty to enforce. So I will not put the blame on the judiciary. I will only blame the court if there is evidence that they have been taken to court and then the judges are frustrating the trial. And that today there is no evidence to show that. The evidence that we see is unwillingness by the government to bring this thing to an end. So this troubles me and this should trouble every Nigerian. Why should this happen? Did these people not go through checkpoints? How were they able to move freely?
Okay.